If you're an actor who is new to Shakespeare and you would like to avoid the number one mistake that I see actors making, then stick with me because I'm going to break it all down, and I'm also going to give you some acting exercises that you can do at home to improve or solve this problem if you are doing it without realizing. And you probably are. I'm sorry, you probably are. Okay, before I can lay out this number one mistake, I have to give you some context. I want you to think about, what is your number one goal when you're acting? To actually do good acting, what are we trying to do here? Okay, so the way I think about it is our number one goal with acting generally is that we are trying to be believable. You can give it different names. Some people say truthful, needs to be grounded in reality, whatever. But essentially, you want somebody to watch you and think that you are that person and having that experience. So it's that believability is usually how we measure whether we're doing good acting. But with Shakespeare, that cannot be our number one goal. We actually have to have 3 things that we achieve at all times, which is probably why it feels so challenging. So let me tell you what those 3 things are. Let's break it down and then we'll talk about how you can solve these issues and what the mistake actually is. So these 3 things that we're balancing are meaning, poetry, and truthfulness. I'm patting my solar plexus and my tummy because that's where I think that truthfulness lives. So meaning means the story, the sense. Do people actually understand what's going on? Of course, this is actually a part of what we do in contemporary acting as well, but we usually don't have to be so conscious about navigating it because generally you can just speak and people understand what's going on. But with Shakespeare, it's essentially like another language, even if you're a native English speaker. So we have to work quite hard and consciously to make sure that the audience is following what is going on. So that is bigger in Shakespeare than it is in contemporary acting. We also have this added heightened text element, the poetry, right? We don't talk like that in everyday life, and that's why it's called a heightened text. It has more vocal and physical energy. Shakespeare has all these poetic elements. He has rhythmic structures, he has rhetorical devices, figurative language, all this stuff going on that you probably learned about in English class and you don't even want to think about it anymore. But it's actually really an important part of Shakespeare. We can't just ignore it and pretend that it's everyday language. But thirdly, we still have to have that believability. We're still trying to be real with it. What we're trying to do in Shakespeare is actually balance those things. We want to tell the story so it's clear. We want to make sure we're acknowledging those poetic elements and doing something with them, but we still want to be believable. Oh my goodness, so much stuff to juggle. So the number one mistake that I actually see people doing is that they don't have the right balance of energy. What does that mean? It comes from those misconceptions. So people are usually either way too high in energy or way too low. When you're high in energy, that is usually where we've neglected the truthfulness element and we're just going for the poetry or the meaning. What it looks like when you're just going for meaning is that you're kind of overdoing things, right? You can see how my energy is like, here's some meaning, this is the story. Oh my goodness, like, whoa. Or it's all about words, right? We don't have any of that truthfulness going on. We don't really believe you. So that's too high energy where you think Shakespeare is supposed to be la-di-da, but you haven't brought that truthfulness back into it. Too low energy, and I would say this is the majority of new actors, unless you have that kind of theatre kid background like me. Most actors are going to be too low in energy when they first come to Shakespeare. This is usually because we're trying so hard to be believable and we're only making that our number one goal, and we haven't acknowledged any of the poetry or the meaning stuff. So we're not being clear enough about the language. How that shows up is usually a little bit introspective, a bit in your head, and that you're maybe skimming over the language. You kind of run through things really fast because you're trying to make it casual. Sorry to tell you, but Shakespeare's not casual. It is heightened. And we have to do this juggling act so we find the perfect sweet spot of energy. So how do we even find that, right? Because Shakespeare, the way it's performed, can vary so much depending on the venue, the director, but also even from play to play, he varies so much between his tragedies, comedies, histories, romances. They're all really different in style. So how do we know, how am I supposed to bring the right amount of energy to my acting? The first step, and the one that I want you to concentrate on for right now, is being aware of where you fall. So when I talked about just then the too low or the too high energy, you probably went, I'm probably that one. And if you're not sure, what I would say is if you've done a lot of film, any kind of screen work, if that's been most of your background, or you haven't done any kind of heightened text stuff before, chances are you're going too small. That's most likely. And if you have a theatre background, or if you're just someone that loves the language, you're probably going too big with your energy. That's a rough idea. So I'm going to give you some exercises for each end of the spectrum to help you balance and find that sweet spot in the middle. Firstly, I want to say, if you are finding this useful, I have a whole series of lessons that goes into even more detail than this, that walks you through how to get a really solid foundation in Shakespeare. It is my Shakespeare with Sarah Essentials Hub. It is new. I am very excited to be sharing it. So if you're feeling like this is useful and you want to go deeper, I will link that in the description. It is everything you need, so you don't have to jump around to different YouTube videos. All right, so let's jump into some acting exercises. I'm going to start with one for the people on the lower energy end of the spectrum, because that will probably be the majority of you guys. What I want you to do is do some bad acting, right? And your skin is probably going to crawl. But if you've got a monologue or a scene that you're working on, particularly with Shakespeare, but you can do this with contemporary as well, I want you to pick up your monologue and I want you to really go over the top. So thinking like, early 20th century declamatory, or even like 19th century, like, I'm doing like melodrama, and just make faces, make big arm gestures, all that kind of stuff that you think is terrible and over the top. Set your goal to be really terrible. And this will usually drive you to be so big in your energy that what will happen is the next time you go back to your regular level of acting, it will have adjusted. It will have brought you naturally to a middle ground. One of the wonderful things about our bodies and our brains is that it loves to find equilibrium. So if you've been hanging out down the lower end of the spectrum and you burst through that and go up way up the other end, it will then just naturally go, let's sit around here, right? So simple thing. If you are like me and you love to do big over the top stuff, I want you to do the opposite. So stillness is what's going to help you. There are lots of ways you can achieve this, but one of the simplest ways to do it is to sit in a chair, sit down, and even if you can, record yourself in an extreme close-up and run through your whole monologue or your scene in extreme close-up. And if you can't actually do a real recording, then just imagine that you are in extreme close-up and think about how small your facial expressions can be. Trying to be as still as possible while experiencing that energy coursing through your body. You're just not letting it out. This is something I talk about a lot in my lessons with the Essentials Hub, where I talk about scaling performance. This is about adapting energy levels so you can play any kind of venue or any kind of material. This makes us really versatile, really employable actors, and it's something I love teaching about. So if you feel like this would be useful for you, maybe because you would like to get into a school and you need to be able to do theatre techniques as well as film, or maybe you just want to be able to perform stage and screen, this is something that's so useful to explore. So if that sounds like you, subscribe at the very least. And if you want to go further, check the description, Shakespeare with Sarah Essentials Hub, and get started there. It's so useful. All right. I'm going to link some videos on screen for you now to help you keep your journey going, but I am here for you. Let me know what you need help with. Let me know your struggles. Let me know if you're big or small. All right. And I'll see you guys soon.